Shut up or get out. That's what my father said when I stepped up to speak the truth at my younger brother's engagement party. I had spent $5,000 on the baby shower for my first child, but once again, my parents took that money and used it on their golden boy. They thought I'd let it slide like always. But then, 2 years later, they came back asking for help. This is my story. Read it and tell me what you think. Should I help them or not? Hi everyone, my name is Emily Monroe. I'm 30 years old and currently living with my husband Nikki and our 3-year-old son in the suburbs of Portland. I can honestly say life is good now, partly because of a stable job and partly because I inherited $1 million from my grandfather. That money wasn't initially meant for just me. According to the original will, the estate was supposed to be divided equally among my parents, my younger brother, and me. But 3 years ago, something happened that changed everything. When my first son was born, I decided to throw a small gathering at my parents' house to welcome our new family member. It was my mother's idea. Actually, I sent her the full amount for the party, $1,500, with a straightforward hope that my son would be introduced to our extended family in a warm, loving atmosphere. But when we showed up, I was stunned. Everything had been set up for a completely different event, my younger brother's engagement party. My parents never asked me. I never even mentioned it. Even when I walked in, no one said a word about my son. Not one congrats. Not a single glance toward Nikki, who stood there holding our newborn, entirely out of place in a room full of laughter and celebration. A few weeks after that incident, my grandfather, the only one who had stayed silent throughout the entire party, went to his attorney's office and asked to revise his will. He was still of sound mind and fully capable of making legal decisions. And he did, right there in front of a legal representative and witnesses. A year later, when he passed, the will was made public. My entire family was floored when they found out everything. Company shares, real estate, and every last cent had been left to me. I was born into a family that wasn't poor and definitely not lacking in love. But what we did lack was fairness, and that imbalance only grew over time. When we were little, my parents actually tried to treat my younger brother, Owen, and me equally. On holidays, we wore matching outfits and took turns with our toys. And if one of us got into trouble, both of us had to sit through one of Dad's life lessons. But everything changed when I turned 12. That day, Owen's teacher called home and said he had an exceptional talent for business. Owen shows financial reasoning and leadership skills well beyond his age, she said. From that moment on, the scales tipped hard. After that, my mom bought Owen the deluxe edition of Monopoly, signed him up for a kids' entrepreneurship summer camp, and couldn't stop bragging about his $1 million ideas over dinner while he was still slurping spaghetti. And me? I wasn't quick like Owen, but I was steady. I wasn't the sharpest in the room, but I always finished what I started. I wasn't a great speaker, but I was meticulous with every task I took on. I was never called a prodigy or gifted, but I was the kid who never let my parents down. Still, to them, hard work didn't seem to count for much. And over time, the favoritism toward Owen only grew more obvious. I kept a high GPA all through middle school, never got a single complaint from teachers, and even received special recognition from the principal for outstanding effort. All I got from Dad was a nod. Meanwhile, the moment Owen won a local pitch competition, Mom threw him a little celebration dinner. I wasn't jealous back then, but I saw it for what it was. Owen was the shining hope, the golden child of the family. Growing up under the weight of such painful favoritism, I was lucky to have 2 people who quietly stood by my side, my grandfather and Uncle Andrew. Their homes were only about 10 miles from ours, and I'd usually spend weekends at my grandpa's place, unless it was exam season or I had some school activity. To most people, my grandfather came across as strict, cold, and even distant. But I knew better. His authentic self wasn't in how he looked, but in those quiet moments when it was just the 2 of us in his little kitchen, lit by a warm yellow light. "You don't need to be like anyone else to be good," he once told me after I skipped Owen's birthday party because I was too upset. "Just do your part well and keep your heart clean." Sometimes he'd call me over to help him clean up the backyard, but when the work was done, he'd slip a $100 bill into my hand. Sometimes 2, even 3, and quietly say, "Save this for school. Don't tell anyone." His voice was low but firm, like he was making a promise. "If your mom finds out, I'll be in trouble." I always nodded, and I always hid the money away. Uncle Andrew was different. He asked me about school, about my friends, about the unfair things I noticed, but never dared to say out loud. He was the first person who taught me how to open my bank account, how to fill out financial aid forms, and how to understand something that took me years to accept. Sometimes family isn't your safety net, but they might hand you a walking stick so you can find your way forward. And then, right after I graduated high school and got a partial scholarship to a private university in the next state, I knew it was time to leave. If I stayed, I'd keep living in the same cycle of favoritism I'd grown far too used to. That day, I had just picked up my acceptance letter. It still smelled like fresh paper, and my name was embossed clearly on the university offer. I remember running home from the post office, my heart pounding with excitement. I planned to wait until after dinner, once the mood was relaxed, before sharing the news with my parents. But the moment I stepped through the door, I froze. Uncle Andrew and his family were there. It turns out they were over for a family dinner, something I'd completely forgotten about, buried in college paperwork. Dinner went on like usual. My mom talked about how Owen was attending a teen startup workshop in Seattle, and Dad asked Uncle Andrew about work. No one noticed me, even though I held the letter in my hands the entire meal. It wasn't until we all moved to the living room for tea that I finally worked up the courage. I stood up and said, I just got accepted. Layton University, partial scholarship. The room went quiet for a few seconds. Then Uncle Andrew broke the silence. He slapped his knee with a grin and said, That's amazing, Emily. I'm really proud of you. You've worked hard. You earned this. I smiled, my heart still racing. I turned to my parents, hoping for a warm look or even just a nod. But my father crossed his arms, leaned back in his chair, and responded with calculated coldness. Partial scholarship, right? That still leaves a lot to cover. Tuition, housing, books, that's not cheap. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. I know. That's why I'm not asking for much. Just $10,000 for the first year. After that, I'll handle the rest. My mom set her teacup down and chimed in right away. Emily, you need to be realistic. We can't throw money into something with no guaranteed return. Your brother is different. Owen has potential. He'll take this family somewhere. I froze at her words. I didn't expect her to say it like that. Like I wasn't even her child. My father nodded. You didn't do anything wrong, but if we have to choose, the money has to go where it counts. And in this case, that's your brother. I swallowed hard. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just asking for fairness. He looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. In this house, fairness doesn't mean splitting things equally. Fairness means putting things where they belong. And if you can't accept that, then move out. His words were ice cold. I had nothing left to say. I looked at my mom one last time, hoping for a softened gaze, but she just lowered her eyes and stayed silent. Right then, Uncle Andrew spoke up, his voice sharp, unlike his usual calm tone. Do you two really believe that? Both kids are your children. How can you talk like Emily's not worth investing in? My father didn't even turn to face him. He just said dryly, This is our family business. Please don't get involved. No one said another word after that. 2 minutes later, Uncle Andrew stood up with his wife and son and left the house. I went upstairs, shut my door, and didn't turn on the lights. That night, I sat on the floor in silence, still holding the acceptance letter I once thought would make my whole family proud. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling in the dark, my mind spinning nonstop. A part of me wished I was strong enough to get up right then, pack my things, and walk away from that house for good, but I couldn't, not yet. The next morning, around 8 a.m., my phone rang. It was Uncle Andrew. Emily, come to my place now. His voice was calm, but there was something urgent underneath. I didn't ask questions. I just threw on clothes and drove the 15 minutes to his house. He was already waiting when I arrived. In the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee hung softly in the air. We sat across from each other at the table. He poured coffee into 2 ceramic mugs, then got straight to the point. I'm giving you $50,000. No interest. You'll pay it back within 5 years after you graduate. Deal. I sat in silence, stunned. The steam from the cup fogged up my glasses, but I knew the warmth rising in my chest wasn't from the coffee. I lowered my head, hands clasped together, then looked up and asked quietly, Why are you doing this for me? He paused, gently rotating the mug in his hands, then looked at me with softened eyes. Because I can't stand watching you be mistreated, and I won't let that unfairness steal your future. He paused again, then spoke slowly, as if weighing every word. You deserve the same starting line as anyone else, not because of who your parents are, but because of what you've worked for. My heart clenched. But this time, it wasn't pain. It was that rare feeling when someone truly sees you. After a moment, I finally replied, "But I only need $10,000 for the first year," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "That amount? It's too much. I don't want to take on a big debt." He shook his head. His voice was calm, but his eyes didn't waver. "No, I want you to focus on school. Don't get distracted by money. Don't take night shifts. Don't drive Uber. Don't fall asleep in class because you're juggling 3 jobs. If you stumble, no one in that house is going to catch you." I looked at him speechless. My chest felt hot, part gratitude, part something caught in my throat. "One more thing," he added, his tone serious. "Don't tell your parents. Trust me, if they know you have that money, they'll find a way to drain every last cent." I nodded quickly, I promise. On the way home, I stopped by the bank and opened a new account in my name. 2 days later, just like he said, the $50,000 showed up. I stared at the number on the screen, hands still shaking. Not because it was a significant amount, but because for the first time in my life, someone truly believed in me. No strings attached, no comparisons, just faith. And in that moment, I thought, if there's anyone who ever deserved to be called Dad in my life, it's Uncle Andrew. 4 years of college passed quietly. My family never found out that Uncle Andrew had loaned me the money. I only went home for occasions like Christmas, Thanksgiving, or my mother's birthday. On weekends, I chose to go back to my grandfather's or Uncle Andrew's house, places where I knew someone would always welcome me with open arms. Even with the $50,000 loan from my uncle, I never let myself slack off. I still worked part-time at the campus library and the coffee shop. I didn't want to touch that money unless necessary. Instead, I focused on doing my best academically, applying for scholarships, financial aid, and whatever small awards the school offered. By the time I graduated, I had used only about $20,000 of the total. The rest remained untouched in the account. I graduated at 23 and was lucky enough to land my first job at a mid-sized tech company in Seattle. Starting salary $50,000 a year, a number that nearly a decade ago was still a dream for fresh grads. I lived frugally, didn't rent a fancy apartment, didn't take expensive trips. Every month, I set aside money to repay that $50,000. And exactly 2 years later, just as I turned 25, I went to see Uncle Andrew to pay it all back. I remember that day so clearly. The air was crisp. He was out back tidying up the yard, and I walked in with a confidence I'd never felt before. "Uncle Andrew," I said, "I'm here to pay back the full $50,000. He wiped his hands on an old towel and looked at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head, half smiling, half serious. "You don't need to pay it back," he said. "Come with me. There's someone I want you to meet." I was surprised, but didn't ask any questions. I just followed him, got in the car, and 15 minutes later, when we pulled up to my grandfather's house, I still had no idea what was going on. As soon as we parked, we headed inside. The living room looked exactly as it had the last time I was there, tidy and well kept, with that brown leather armchair still sitting by the window. My grandfather was in it, gazing out at the garden, but the moment he heard the door open, he turned around right away. He was 75 now. His hair almost entirely white, but his back was still straight, his eyes still sharp, and he still carried that quiet authority I'd known since I was a kid. I was about to greet him, but Uncle Andrew stepped forward first. He turned to me and spoke slowly. "The $50,000 wasn't from me, it was from your grandfather." I froze. Uncle looked back at him, then continued, "That same night, when your parents refused to help with school, I came here and told him everything. He didn't need to hear the whole story. He just said one thing. She's the only one who's never asked for anything. So this time, let her ask." He turned to me again, voice softer now. "But your grandpa was afraid. Afraid you'd rely on it too much. Afraid if your parents found out, they'd try to take a share. So he asked me to put it in my name, to loan it to you as a test." I couldn't speak, my throat was tight. My grandfather slowly leaned forward, used the armrest to stand, and walked over. He placed his hand on my shoulder firmly but gently, just enough for me to feel the weight of everything he was saying. "You kept your word," he said. "You lived right. You didn't ask for more. You didn't run away from anything, so that money doesn't need to be paid back." I lowered my head. Emotions swelled like a wave, but I swallowed them whole. Before I left, he turned back, his voice calm but firm. "I'm proud of you. Now that you're working, don't forget to stop by and visit your old man once in a while." I nodded, afraid that if I opened my mouth, I might cry. Uncle's car engine started just as the sky began to turn dusky. The sunset poured through the windshield, warming my face. But deep inside, I felt something I had never known so clearly before. what it meant to be truly loved without having to fight for it. Just live with integrity and keep the promises you make. A year later, I met Nicky. He was kind, thoughtful, and the type of man who made me laugh in ways I didn't know I needed. We got married, and 3 years ago, our son Austin was born. His arrival was the most beautiful thing that's ever happened in my life. He gave everything meaning. I worked harder, came home earlier, and every morning, the first thing I did was smile at him, sleeping peacefully beside us. I kept thinking after everything, maybe my son would be the reason my parents finally changed, that becoming grandparents, holding their first grandchild, would make them leave the favoritism behind. I wanted to believe they'd love Austin the way I used to wish they'd loved me, but I was wrong. Not only did they not love him, they turned what should have been the most special day of his life into a scar. A scar that didn't just mark a memory, but became the final push behind a decision I should have made years ago, to cut ties with my family completely. 3 years ago, just a few days after Austin was born, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was gentle, sweet, like there had never been any distance between us. "Come home," she said. "I want to throw a little party to welcome Austin. Just a chance to introduce him to the family and maybe bring everyone closer again." I was a bit surprised, but also touched. Without overthinking, I said yes, and since she insisted on handling everything, I transferred her $5,000 to help cover the costs. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday evening around 6 o'clock, Nicky and I packed up Austin and headed to my parents' house. As we stepped out of the car, I was taken aback by the scene in front of us. The house was decorated far more lavishly than I expected. Tables stretched across the backyard, string lights twinkled from the porch, scented candles, balloons, and even a large backdrop standing in the garden with glittery capital letters. But as I walked closer, I froze. The words weren't "Welcome, baby Austin." They read, "Owen and Madison's engagement party." My whole body went cold. I gripped Nicky's hand tightly. He looked at me, confused. And there I stood in the middle of my childhood home's backyard, holding my newborn son, like a guest who wasn't invited to the party I thought I'd thrown for my child. The emotions I'd been swallowing felt like a balloon being squeezed past its limit. I clenched my fists, stared straight at the backdrop, and shouted across the garden full of guests, "What the hell is going on here?" Instantly, the music cut off. Every eye turned toward me. My mother rushed over, placing a hand on mine. Her voice rushed and flustered. "Emily, this is a shared party. I just thought combining them would be easier." I stepped back, staring at her. "A shared party? Did you ever tell me that?" She said nothing. I pointed at the backdrop. "If this is a shared party, then where's Austin's name? Where is my son in any of this?" Still no answer. Right then, my father stepped out of the house, hands in his pockets, his voice deep and cold. "Don't turn this into a scene. Are you trying to embarrass the whole family?" I turned to him. For a second, I felt every moment of the years I'd spent being overlooked crash into my chest. Then I glanced to the left. Uncle Andrew and my grandfather were standing quietly near the garden's edge. Neither said a word, but they both nodded at me, and that was enough. They were with me. I didn't hold back anymore. I fired back at my father. "This family image you're trying to protect, did it ever include me?" I stepped forward, my voice rising. "I paid for a party to welcome my son. I thought maybe this time I'd get to be the priority. But no, nothing's changed. Still lies. Still treating me like the outsider." Right then, I guess my father hit his breaking point too. He snapped, his voice sharp and guttural. "Shut up or get out." I stared straight into his eyes, said nothing. Then I turned, walked up to the stage, and grabbed the mic from the stunned MC. The whole yard went silent. I lifted my head, voice steady, every word landing with weight. If anyone's wondering what's going on, let me clear it up. I looked around at everyone. My aunts, uncles, cousins, old friends, and Madison, the stunned bride-to-be, standing beside Owen. This party, it was paid for with my money. I gave my mother $5,000 to throw a welcome party for my newborn son, Austin. Instead, they quietly turned it into my brother's engagement celebration. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. I gripped the mic tighter, my voice dropping lower. And this isn't new. I've had scholarships pulled, been asked to step aside, and told to figure it out on my own because I was never the priority. Owen's always been the golden boy, always the center of everything. I paused, took a deep breath, and looked at Austin, snuggled in Nicky's arms, his cheeks flushed, wide-eyed at the noise. But today is different, because I'm a mother now, and my son, he's never going to grow up in silence the way I did. I lowered the mic. No one moved. No one stopped me. For the first time in my life, my voice echoed through a home that had spent years pretending not to hear me. As soon as I finished speaking, the air felt frozen. But at that exact moment, I saw my father start moving toward the stage. His face twisted with rage like he might rip the mic from my hands. He moved fast, almost charging forward. But Uncle Andrew stepped out just in time, blocking his path. They stood close just for a few seconds, but Uncle never broke eye contact with him. He raised one hand, placing it gently but firmly against my father's chest, a gesture that wasn't forceful, yet strong enough for everyone to see exactly what it meant. Emily wasn't standing alone. My father froze, trembling with anger, but didn't say another word. I turned back to the crowd, my voice low, steady, not shaken at all. Some of you might think I'm overreacting today, but what happened at this party? It's just the last drop in a glass that overflowed a long time ago. I looked directly at my parents, not with fury anymore, but with the cold, drained exhaustion of someone who has nothing left to lose. And if one day Austin asked me about his grandparents, I paused for a moment, then spoke each word slowly, like I was carving it into my bones. I'll tell him you're dead. The silence was absolute. Not even the cicadas dared to break it. I continued, voice unwavering. From this moment on, I'm no longer your daughter. Go live your lives with your golden child. The garden stayed deathly still. You could have heard a leaf fall. I dropped the mic, stepped off the stage, and walked straight to my husband and son. Moments later, we left the party. My grandfather and Uncle Andrew followed right behind. When we reached the car, my grandfather placed his hand on my shoulder. He looked me in the eye and said, "Well done, my girl." And in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. The next morning, just as I finished brewing my coffee, my phone buzzed. A message from Owen. "Are you happy now? The party's ruined, Madison called off the engagement, and everything's fallen apart. All because of you." I didn't respond. Instead, I pressed and held the message, then deleted it. I didn't want to keep a single word from anyone who had always seen me as a thorn in their side. The months that followed were strangely peaceful. No more noisy relatives, no more forced small talk from my parents. Life slowed down for me, Nikki, and Austin. On weekends, we often took Austin to visit Grandpa and Uncle Andrew. My grandfather, the man who had quietly opened a new door for me, adored Austin. Every time we visited, he would sit in his armchair and watch as Austin crawled around the living room rug, shaking a plastic toy that rattled with every movement. He didn't say much, just observed quietly, smiling, sometimes mumbling softly to himself, like he was talking to someone else, maybe to the past. There was a time when I thought I'd lost a family, but in those quiet afternoons, I realized I still had one, and I was building it again, piece by piece. But nature has its way of reminding us that nothing lasts forever. A year after Austin was born, on a Monday morning, while I was at the office, Uncle Andrew called. His voice was strained, tight. "Your grandfather, he's gone." The chill that ran through me was instant. Just 2 days earlier, he had been fine. He had told me he was rereading The Old Man and the Sea, and that he wanted to buy Austin a giant wooden block set. I never got to say thank you. I never got to hug him one last time. Losing him was a profound personal loss, not just because he was the last person in the family who loved me unconditionally, but because he was the first person who ever taught me the value of quiet strength. 1 month after my grandfather passed, the entire family was invited to his home for the reading of his will. By 9:00 a.m., the living room was packed. Then, a silver-haired man named Walter Crowley, my grandfather's attorney, stepped forward and began. He opened with formalities, confirming the presence of all relevant parties, reviewing the date the final will was written, and affirming that my grandfather, Harold Monroe, was of sound mind and full legal capacity when he drafted the document. And then he started reading. Everyone had a share. Uncle Andrew was left the lakeside cabin and shares in a small construction company my grandfather had quietly invested in. Aunt Carol received the vintage Ford Thunderbird that had sat untouched in the garage for nearly 2 decades. Aunt Linda was granted full ownership of a rental property in Tacoma, along with a sizable cash amount. One by one, names were read, assets were clearly listed, but when it came to my parents, he paused. Mr. Crowley glanced down at the page, then looked up, his voice calm but firm. "The final section of this will pertains to the assets that under normal circumstances would have been assigned to Mr. Richard Monroe and Mrs. Martha Monroe. All eyes in the room immediately shifted to my parents. My father sat up straighter, as if already bracing to hear how much he was getting. Mr. Crowley turned the page and continued in the same even tone. After careful and voluntary consideration, Mr. Harold Monroe has decided to transfer all assets originally intended for his son, Richard Monroe, and daughter-in-law, Martha Monroe, to his granddaughter, Emily Monroe. A wave of murmurs rolled through the room. Mr. Crowley paused, then read aloud the written statement from the will. I do this not because I do not love my son, but because I can no longer turn a blind eye to the injustice that Emily Monroe has endured for years. The clear favoritism shown by Richard and Martha toward their younger son, Owen, has caused Emily lasting harm, culminating in the incident where they used Emily's money to fund Owen Monroe's engagement party without prior notice or permission. The living room erupted. My father shot up from his seat and slammed his hand on the table. What? This is outrageous. It's a setup. He pointed directly at me. She and Andrew planned this whole thing. My mother broke into tears. My brother Owen threw his water glass on the floor, voice cracking with frustration. This isn't fair. But Mr. Crowley didn't flinch. He tapped once on the file in front of him and raised his voice just enough to be heard over the commotion. I ask everyone to remain calm. He fixed his gaze on my parents and Owen and spoke with cold precision. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe and Mr. Owen Monroe, please respect the wishes of the deceased. This will is legally binding, signed, and witnessed in full mental clarity with complete supporting documentation. Any attempt to contest, distort, or disrupt the process will be subject to legal consequences. No one said another word. The room fell into a heavy, frozen silence. After the will was read, as I stepped out the front door, my father was already waiting at the gate. He looked at me, not with the same rage he'd shown in the living room, but with a cold, bitter venom in his eyes. You bastard, he hissed through clenched teeth. You think this means you've won? I didn't say a word. I gave him one look, then walked straight to my car, opened the door, and drove away. Never looked back. I thought that after that day, they'd cause a scene, file complaints, threaten lawsuits, maybe even show up at my door demanding answers. But no, nothing, not a word. Maybe they knew this time the price wouldn't be small, and they knew this time I wouldn't back down. The following 2 years passed faster than I expected. Austin is 3 now. He's no longer the tiny baby I used to cradle in my arms. He runs around the house, rolls across the yard, and throws tantrums that make me unsure whether to laugh or surrender. I kept living the life I chose with Nikki, with our son, in a small house filled with sunlight and laughter. No texts, no calls. No one even mentioned the words Mom or Dad. I thought maybe that was it. Perhaps they'd finally accepted that I was no longer a part of that family until 2 days ago. The sun had just dipped when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and froze. It was my mother. She stood there thinner than I remembered. Her hair was messy, her face hollow. She didn't speak right away, just stood there for a moment, then finally said with a trembling voice, Your father's in the hospital. The doctors say he needs surgery. I don't know what to do anymore. Emily, please, I need $70,000 to cover the cost. I'm begging you. I didn't feel sympathy. I didn't feel anger either, just a long, empty silence pressing in my chest. I looked at her and asked plainly, Where's Owen? She pressed her lips together, then whispered, He doesn't have the money. I nodded slowly, then looked her straight in the eyes. Then sell the house you two live in. Sell it and take care of him. She froze. I stepped back, hand resting on the door. From the day you both hurt my son, right after he was born, I stopped being part of your lives. Then I said it, firm and final. If you don't leave my doorstep right now, I'm calling the police. She stood there for a few seconds longer, then turned away quietly. I closed the door behind her, and I didn't look back. Even though I've completely cut ties with them, deep down, something still doesn't feel fully at peace. I don't know if I was right or wrong to turn them away in their time of need. Part of me says I did the right thing, that after all the hurt they caused, I don't owe them anything. But there are moments when I wonder if tomorrow I were the one lying in a hospital bed, would I want them to show up? Will my son someday understand the decision I made? I don't want to go back to being that girl I once was, the one who stayed quiet, endured everything, and kept making excuses for the pain others caused her. I stood up, I protected my son. But still, was the price of that clarity too cold? And that's why I'm sharing this story, not for praise and not to justify myself, but to ask you, the kind souls who've stayed with me through every word, was I wrong to turn my back on my parents when they needed me most? Was I too cruel, or was I simply trying to protect what I believe is right? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear your perspective, whether you agree with me or not. And if you think this story is worth sharing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and pass it along to anyone who's ever struggled with the pain that comes with the word family. Thank you for listening. See you again in the following story.